Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to begin in the 35th chapter of Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians. And the resurrection is the central tenet. It's one of our most controversial yet crucial claims, and this baffles the imagination and the spirit. Really the greatest miracle in all the faith, and it is a central tenet to which we cling to in order to lay hold of something greater that awaits us in the afterlife. Now, in the Gospels, we are introduced to the occasion in the occurrence, but the Gospel authors, none of them with the exception of John, extrapolates, and not even extensively at that, about what the resurrection means for us. That is primarily to Paul, to whom we are indebted, and the most extensive extrapolation he gives on the doctrine is found in this 15th chapter in 1 Corinthians. So what the resurrection means for us is of paramount significance, and it should be a concern of every Christian. So the 35th verse reads, "But someone might say, 'How are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come?'" So these are two common questions to the statement of the resurrection, is how, in the mechanics of the miraculous operation, are perhaps never meant for us to know, but we do know that it is enabled and made possible by the Son's bitter atonement. And the body, the nature of the body, now the resurrection was at this point a tenet of what came to be Orthodox Judaism. There is what was then the Pharisees, but what we now know as Orthodox Jews, and it had been some time since the proclamation of the prophets, to whom some of them vaguely and sporadically alluded to the doctrine. But the expectation was we would be resurrected in bodily form to dwell in an eternity in heaven with our Maker. And that differentiated the Jews from, for example, the Greeks, to whom the idea of immortality was shared, but the idea of the resurrection, they saw the body as evil, was not only unnecessary but undesirable. And the nature of that body is the nature of the second question, which he answers. "Senseless ones, what you sow is not made alive until it dies." This is an irrefutable fact of agriculture, that the cycle of life and death is a process of reaping and sowing. "And as to what you sow, you do not sow the body which is to be, but a bare grain, it may be wheat or some other grain." So the process of reaping and sowing, it should be understood that reaping is the act of scattering seeds, and gathering is the act of plucking the fruit. And so with the body in mind, that's going to come into play as this chapter unfolds. "But Elohim gives it a body as he wants, and to each seed a body of its own." So as human beings, our nature is derived from, and existence is owed to, Elohim, who made us, and he created our bodies with a purpose, and the ultimate purpose is that some may live to have a perfect body in resurrected form. We're going to touch on that as the discourse unfolds, but also whereas those who are hellbound are deprived of the resurrection in bodily form, so their immortal soul dwells in essential eternity in solitude, no one to comfort them or anything else. "A flesh is not made the same flesh, but there is one flesh of men, and another of flesh of beast, and another of fish, and another of birds." So he's acknowledging the fact within the diversity of species in the animal kingdom, not every one shares the same flesh. There is a marked difference between, say, a reptile and the skin of mammals, which are covered by hair, and the other forms of animal life, fish, birds, they all have, there's no comparison between feathers and scales or anything else from any of these other forms of animal life forms. Also bodies of the heavens and earthly bodies, but the esteem of the heavens is truly one, and the esteem of the earthly is another. So he's differentiating and distinguishing the superiority of the heavens to the earth. There is nothing on earth which can adequately compare to heaven, so we want to bear that in mind as he proceeds to make his analogy. One esteem of the sun, and another esteem of the moon, and another esteem of the stars, for stars differ from star in esteem. So I personally interpret this passage as suggesting that there are more exalted stations in the resurrection and heavenly life for saints who performed greater miracles and did more works and really took the disciples' call literally and daily and consistently than the thief on the cross, for instance. So, for example, Mother Teresa, it stretches my imagination as being just that they'd be exalted to an equal state, that she'd be exalted to an equal station as the thief on the cross. So each of these heavenly bodies are used to represent progressively greater or different gradations of the esteem and the heavenly exaltation, which awaits some of us. So I guess there's three main bodies, the moon, the stars, and the sun, and not in that order, but they each carry a certain radiance, and there's no comparison between the sun and the moon, and the sun is no comparison to a lot of stars in our universe as far as radiance exuded. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption. It is raised in incorruption. So this whole resurrective process consists of transforming a corruptible body into an incorruptible one. And what does that mean? We're going to touch on that. That's going to be a key thought to bear in mind for as the chapter unfolds. It is sown in disrespect. It is raised in esteem. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in principle. So he expounds on two parallel principles to the ones he just enunciated. So it's the body, the human body in itself is weak in that it's destined to perish eternally after the life in which it protected and in which abided in it is no more. But the resurrection is the process and the result of power, without which we would have no hope to transform these frail vessels that we currently are into a body that can inhabit an eternity in heaven. Eternity is a long time. It is sown in a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. The old dichotomy between spirit and physical material matter is once more we find this throughout the writings of Paul in comparisons to spirit and flesh and other things along those lines. So that's going to be of some significance for the next verses of which we read. And so it has been written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. So this is a reference to the Messiah, who is referred to as the second Adam and compared to him more extensively by Paul in Romans 5:12 through 17. But for now, it suffices to say that because Adam succumbed to sin, I've even entertained the theory that taught by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that had Adam not fallen, he could not have indulged in procreative activities with wife, and we could never be here. But but it was because of the fall of Adam, which necessitated in the perpetual sinfulness throughout humanity and everybody in all ages, which necessitated the emergence and existence of a Savior. So that is and he is compared to the second Adam in that he gives some life eternally. inasmuch as Adam is to whom we are indebted to for our life as our most primitive ancestor. The spiritual, however, was not first, but the natural, and afterward the spiritual. So he's enunciating on the differences between the spirit and the natural or material or earthly once more. Remember, in the 44th verse, they don't quite connect, so I initially misspoke. The first man was of the earth, earthy. The second man is of the master, from the heavens. So their origins are thus identified. This returns us to the 45th verse, where that with the comparison between the first Adam and the second Adam, who came to unravel and undo all the evil which Adam inflicted on the human race. It is also to him to whom we owe our existence, so we shouldn't be too hard on the guy. And as we have borne the likeness of the earthy, we shall also bear the likeness of the heavens. Now this is an endorsement of the second resurrection, so the great gift of the greatest miracle of its occurrence has yet to unfold. It is when that power is transmuted to us, where we will join him in the resurrection, and this will take place after a final judgment, during which time the goats are separated from the sheep, of which we can read of in Matthew's 25th chapter. And I say, and this I say, brothers, that flesh and blood is unable to inherit the kingdom of Elohim, neither does corruption inherit incorruption. So he's just stating a fact that which is not aligned with the nature of anything else is not going to accept it, and it's so flesh and blood, that means bodily vessels, are unfit, at least in themselves, to inherit eternal life and are incapable of giving it. And it takes a certain state of spiritual advancement to attain, or maturity to attain, heavenly salvation, and we are expunged of the corruption which exists in us, which enables us to access and be acceptable in his presence. See, I speak a secret to you. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. So he's sleeping was equivalent synonym of death, used also in Paul's other significant writing on the resurrection, 1 Thessalonians 4:18 and 18, or somewhere in the range thereof. But the resurrection initiates and is defined and is characterized by change and transformation. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Therein we understand that no dead saint has yet to experience the resurrection. It will be an all-for-one and one-for-all moment, and it will come in the blink of an eye. So he announces the brevity of the event, and for this corruptible has to put on incorruption, and this mortal has to put on immortality. He's simply acknowledging the fact that the body in itself, and it is mortal and therefore incapable, at least in itself, of delivering immortality and incorruption in an incorruptible form, and that is made possible by the mortality which he puts on by exercising faith in the doctrines of the resurrection and all its demands of the straight and narrow in the path of salvation. And when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall come to be the word that has been written, death is swallowed up in the overcoming. Now the defeat of death is the is a consequence and side casualty of the cosmic eternal struggle between good and evil, according to which death is an enemy which the Messiah came to undo, and through him we may experience life eternally with him, and because of what he did for us and not for what we can do for him. O death, where is your sting? O grave, where is your overcoming? So he's announcing an impotence of potent forces which instill fear in the natural man, who does not prepare for death because it's such an unpleasant reality. They don't view it as a destination or a continuation of life, but as the cessation of life. And so they avoid thinking about it and talking about it. But to those who have faith in the resurrection, their death, the sting of death and the grave is removed and expunged. And the sting of death is the sin, and the power of the sins is the Torah. But thanks to Yahweh, who gave us the overcoming through our master Yahshua the Messiah. So Yahshua performed a functionally subordinate role to the Father, according to whose behest he came to live, teach, minister, and die on the cross for something he didn't do, but it was all part of a divine purpose and plan, to which we are all indebted, and through which we may be made heirs of eternal life. But thanks to Yahweh, who gives us the... Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Master, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Master. So the resurrection demands on our parts that we not only look at it as a distant item of faith that will be fulfilled just by wishful thinking, but we have to do. Doing is demanded. Action is imperative for the kingdom and the good news to spread. It cannot be accomplished by prayer alone or even the faith in the resurrection alone, but we are instructed and commanded to remain active and immersed in our work for the kingdom while awaiting this blessed promise. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.